Welcome to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Slackin' Off. I'm your host, Brady Slack. And today, guest someone who is, I've been able to spend a little bit of time with him over the last little bit. We're in a coaching group together, and I've learned a little bit about him. Kyle Sullivan is the CEO and founder of Unleash the Champ, and we're going to dive into Unleash the Champ today a little bit. But first off, thanks for coming on, Kyle.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to be on here and have the conversation.
This will be a good one, and I think it's kind of funny. We've had different conversations with different people. Some of them who have been in ministry. You've been involved with the ministry for a while, but I want to start off foundationally a little bit before we dive into the kind of the ministry aspect of your life. Tell me about if we can, tell me about your childhood growing up. What was that like? And that'll lead into why you got into ministry, if you will.
No doubt, man. So I was born to two high school students. My dad was a senior in high school. My biological mom was a sophomore. And so from jump, it's like babies having babies. And my biological mom, she bounced 5-6 months in. So it's just my dad and I. I'm grateful that he stepped up and said, "Hey, I'm gonna raise him until I find someone." And he did do that. I was like 3.5 when who I know as my mom and dad got married. And so I grew up in Louisiana, small town. If you and your listeners have heard of Duck Dynasty, that's my hometown.
There you go.
And so yeah, man, it's a great place to be from. Man, good people, good manners, great food. It's just kind of you grow up going, okay, like you do well, you have manners, you play nice, and everything's good. Got into high school and I was your stereotypical jock. Played baseball and football and did powerlifting and so all of this, and really a lot of what I did growing up was just to serve a subconscious desire to be accepted. And so I didn't realize that until later on in life through counseling and a lot of work. But so much of what I did and the things that I would strive for, and it was all to be accepted and to get that attaboy that life didn't necessarily afford me a lot of times.
And I'm not a therapist. I'm an accountant by trade. Did some of that have to do with the fact that your mom left? I'm just kind of curious if that set the framework for that.
Yeah, man. So I didn't realize it until probably 5 years ago, where a lot of my emotional unavailability, like I wasn't you kind of have two paths when you feel like you've had less than great relationships. So you're either going to be like the womanizer, or you're the one that kind of like warns off relationships and doesn't really involve yourself in them. I was kind of the latter. Like, hey, I'm cool. I'm rarely in relationships growing up. I'd have girlfriend here or there, whatever. But I was so afraid that and it was subconscious because I never knew my bio mom. But the impact of her leaving did affect me. And so I just kind of was like, nah, I don't really need relationships, and I don't want to have a significant female in my life leave, so I'd rather just not even get involved.
But did that also kind of pave the way for what you would attribute to some of your successes as well? Kind of this nagging thing that's always behind you that kind of lit a fire under your ass and, made you try and accomplish more?
No doubt, man. And it's a double-edged sword of like, man, I had these high expectations for myself, and my dad, he also, most parents say, I want you to be better than I was.
Absolutely.
My dad was that way times 10 because his goal, he would jokingly, but I think realistically say, if I can get you through high school without a kid, I win. Because he didn't make that goal.
Yeah.
And he wasn't in the military, but he was militant. I mean, it was work hard, high standard, and because of that, if I did average or below average, he didn't say nothing. it was like, you just gonna beat yourself up. But I would get praised when I would exceed expectations on the field or the classroom or at home or with my friends. It was like, okay, I perform, I get praise, I like that. I'm gonna just keep doing that.
Now, so on your website, Unleash the Champ, you kind of highlight a little bit about your story, and I'm kind of curious to know now, this desire to be accepted, you got into a little bit of trouble. Whether if this was after high school or in high school, I don't know the timeline, but was it that desire to be accepted that put you in that situation, or were there other circumstances that got you into that trouble?
Nah, man, it was yeah, it was a desire to be accepted and liked. And so I was so focused on sports that, man, I was 99.9% straight laced, leading up to my last semester of high school. I didn't
Okay.
want to do anything that would affect my sports. So like I drink or whatever, but like there was no drugs. There was nothing that would get me kicked off the team or in trouble with any kind of sports organization. Because my whole plan was, I'm gonna play high school athletics. I'm gonna go to college. I'm gonna play ball, and I that was my focus.
Sure.
And so that New Year's Eve, my senior year, I remember the first time that someone was like, "Hey, here's something," and I was like, you know what? Like I've been so locked in. I remember thinking, okay, I can do a little bit. Like
Yeah.
we don't have any football coming up. We don't have. I wasn't playing baseball in high school at the time. Powerlifting was a couple months away. Like I had time, and I was like, you know what? Cool, I'll try that. And honestly, man, like someone gave me a blunt New Year's Eve, my senior year, and I was like, I hate this. This is dumb. Like I hate this. Anybody that knew me was like, of course you wouldn't like weed. You don't like to be slowed down. Like I'm a naturally energetic guy, and so to just be sitting there like a dang zombie, I'm like, nah, f this. I ain't about that. And but what did is my desire to be accepted when I got into college. That's where the real drugs, if you will, came into play of coke and crystal and ecstasy and the uppers. All of my buddies that were like druggies in high school, they were all on the downers, and I didn't know this whole world existed
Yeah.
of things that would enhance my already energetic personality, and that's where I got hooked, man. And it was definitely from a desire to be accepted, to be liked, to not be shunned. That it took me years later to figure out where that all stemmed from.
So I'll come back to this in a minute, but I think um, generally, I'll say generally, there are a lot of people that struggle with the ability to be pleased with oneself. They're happy with whatever situation they find themselves in, and I think there's unhealthy and healthy, and I think there is unhealthy and healthy aspects of wanting more and wanting to be accepted and wanting praise. But have you will bypass the middle, and we'll bypass the middle, come back to it, but have you gotten to a point now where you can find peace with yourself and you are accepting of yourself? I'm genuinely curious.
100%, man. The last 3 years, I can say I've gotten to a place where I really like me. I've made peace with the destruction that I did. I've
Yeah.
made peace with the destruction I did to others, to myself. And and a lot of it is, this is gonna resonate because we both kind of adhere to like just being true to who we want to be and
Yeah.
asking ourselves the question, like, what needs to die in us, as our coach
Yeah.
and homie Cody says, like, okay, cool, like I'm good with the good and the things that I want to change. I'm content but not satisfied. Like, okay, I'm in a good spot. I got a great family. My wife's incredible. I mean, I told her the whole gamut the first time, like first date, first coffee, like boom, here's what I've done. Because I was on the other side of it when we met. And she's like, that's cool. That's not who you are. Like, yeah, that's not who I am now. And And it does. It takes a process, man, to just kind of go, okay. Because what sucks, I had to make most peace that there's some people that are still, I mean, this is over 10 years ago, man, that are still using that I got started. That I see on Facebook or I see, I hear about from back home, and they're still using, and I gave them the first hit. I had to just make peace with that.
I mean, yeah, and I would understand how that might still give you um, something to relish, right? But it also, I think, part of that comes down to the fact that we're all human. We all have agency, yeah, the ability to choose for oneself, and there's only so much you can do before they have to choose for themselves, right? What for someone that's trying to maybe overcome what you've overcome, what are some things that one could maybe do to be more accepting of themselves or not look outwards for that inward appeal? How can someone just find that peace that they need with themselves?
Yeah, man. A lot of the questions that I would ask myself is this beneficial to who I am now? Because we can get so debilitated by, oh man, here's the things I did in the past. And I kind of use this analogy of we've all been in cars. Probably 99.99% of listeners have been in a car. The rear view mirror is much smaller than the windshield. So they're both within sight, but mine is going, okay, here how I became accepting of is focusing on where I'm going with the little bit of an awareness of where I've been. Because over time, the folks that I think stay in the stuck of their past is they just keep trying to revisit it, keep trying to revisit it, keep trying to revisit it. And it's like, yo, like you learned the lesson. Like, you know the principle. Move on. Like
Yeah.
it happened. It's done. Like 30 seconds ago as we're talking, we'll know will never exist again.
Yeah.
2 seconds ago will never exist again. We still got 30 seconds ahead. We don't know what that's going to be like. So let's focus on that.
And obviously we'll go the route now of kind of your ministry, because I'd like you talk about that, and it reminds me of some things that are mentioned in scripture where we're supposed to remember the things that we've done, and in certain parts of scripture it talks about some of the sins that others have committed, and why they're supposed to remember them. And I think it's twofold. I think we're supposed to remember them so we understand and we know how it made us feel, and potentially how it made others feel, so that we can, again, you can't have the bad without the good, and you can't have the happy without the sad. So like it's important to have both of those. That being said, guided into your ministry, you have this kind of downfall, if you will. There was some trouble, some drugs that you've alluded to. That is like polar opposites. Go from drugs to ministry. Why, right?
So I got jumped at a drug deal.
Okay.
And the first and only time I got in any trouble in the 3.5 years that I was using and dealing. And I'm in that moment, I was a very quick student. I said, that sucked. I don't want to do that again. And so I called a guy that I had respected in my parents' church that they and basically forced me to go to in high school. And I call him up, dude, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I just got my ass kicked. And I say, I need effing Jesus. I just didn't abbreviate anything. And he said, all right, cool, come over. Unfazed. And so I go up to his house and I get out, and I'm still bloody. Lips already bruised. I mean, imagine it. Like, your eyes swollen, my shirt's ripped, I'm bloody. And calm, cool, collected, this guy, he's like, rough night? I'm like, yeah, let's talk about this Jesus guy. And so through the conversation, man, he led me to the Lord on his front porch while I was in between me taking drags of a cigarette. Went to sleep at his house, woke up the next day, said, all right, cool, what do I do now? And I was in university. I was living at a frat house. I was doing all the things. I was spending more time at the frat house than the classroom. And so I went to the school and dropped out and moved out of the frat house. Stopped. I mean, it was an about face within about 12 hours. And then I went, okay, what do I do now? I need to get a new environment. I need to get new friends. I need to get out of what I was doing. So I had to have some conversations with some people to make sure that we didn't revisit each other.
Yeah.
And I set out on going to church for the first time for myself. And within a couple months, I basically self detox with the help of a group of guys that were just in my butt about uh, making sure I didn't go back because I wanted to often. And then I just started serving in church. And I really said, you know what? I want to be I couldn't stand going to church, man. Middle school, high school. My dad got saved when I was in eighth grade. I couldn't stand going to high school. I like high school, it was just I wanted to do sports. I wanted to do the things I wanted, and church was an inconvenience. It was stuffy, there were all these rules. It sucked. And it was more probably my interest, but it didn't appeal to me. And so the biggest draw for me, man, is I wanted to go work at churches and be who I wish I would have seen on a church staff when I was in middle school and high school. I wanted to be the guy that, like, you don't seem like you work here. Good. You don't seem stuffy. Good. The biggest compliment I got in the 12 years that I was in ministry was, you seem normal. And I'm like, thank God. Thank God, because my whole philosophy of ministry, no matter what area it was in, whether youth or groups or first impressions, associate pastor, whatever, is I wanted any environment I was in within the church, I wanted people to belong before they believed or behaved, and I think we did that rather effectively.
The three word, I mean, you kind of highlighted three words that were kind of interesting: believe, belong, and behave. I think sometimes a lot of people get caught up in the idea that there are rules and there are things we can't. A lot of times people will say the things we can't do rather than maybe looking at the things that we can do, and what that relationship with a higher power will allow us to do. But I think a lot of the times too, people forget that that higher power, God specifically, will meet us where we're at. It doesn't matter whether we've just gotten beat, in a drug deal, or we're already in a relationship mindset with God, but He will meet us where we're at and help us get us to where we need to be. And I think that's important. But going back to this kind of belong, belong, and what was the third one? Behave. Has that? Where did you come up with that? Was that something that was taught in ministry? Is that something that you've translated over into what you're doing right now with executive coaching, or is that just kind of something that you spat out in the last 30 seconds?
No, it was an axiom for the one of the churches that I worked at. I worked at Life Church, which is a Oklahoma based church. Um, really massive. I think 45 locations now in 11 states.
Wow.
And that was one of the things that we would say we want them to belong before they believe. And I added, because I mean my students were wilding out. I was in a part of Tulsa that like drew very eclectic group of kids, like your goody two shoes that like grew up in the church, and then the ones that like came because there was a pretty guy or girl and they trying to sneak around the building and make out and whatever. And so I added the behave part, because it's one thing to like, hey, I want you to belong before you believe. Well, before you believe, people think you got to behave, and I'm like, no, no, no. Like, whether you want to wild out or you want to come hovering on your Bible, you belong here. We're
Mhm.
glad you're here.
But the belief turns out to turn into behavior. It's kind of like the idea of, if you have a thought, that thought might turn into an action, and that action might turn into a habit, right? So tell me, diving into this ministry aspect, what are some of the highlights that you had during ministry that you have since taken into this atmosphere of executive coaching?
Yeah, I think the highlight, man, was I got to be on some really big speaking stages, and that's really what is front facing of our business now is me speaking at events. So, you know, if they're familiar with ministry world, maybe they know names like Craig Rochelle, pastor of Life
Hmm.
Church, or Mike Todd, pastor of Transformation Church, which are two really large churches
Yeah,
based out of Oklahoma. I got to teach with both of them. I got to do team teaching with both of them over the course of the time. That was awesome.
yeah,
Um, I got to be a part of Transformation Church when we went from a little like converted grocery store to the church buying an arena and we having 6,000 people every Sunday. That was incredible because it fueled vision of like, man, I think we could do events in an arena one
yeah.
day. Um, and then just seeing youth ministry, there's been a lot of moments, but most of them happened like just a couple weeks ago. I got hit up by an old student, and I would always say in ministry that the success of my student ministry is not told while they're in school. It's told when they're 4 to 8 years out
Yeah,
and they're in the world. How are you operating? Are you still like pursuing Jesus? And so it's just been really cool to have wedding invitations or baby shower invitations, and
that's
and
cool.
knowing that I made an impact, that they still want to stay connected, when they don't have to and their parents aren't taking them to a Wednesday night church.
That that's kind of it was interesting. I mentioned earlier to you that a couple weeks ago I interviewed a high school basketball coach that was at the high school I attended, and we talked a little bit about this as well. He talked about the successes that some of his athletes experienced while they were on the court, and then what they were doing after, long after they'd been off the court. And we talked a little bit about some of the qualities that some of those athletes had while they were in basketball, what made them successful, and now those similar qualities are making them successful in life, whether that be in their career, in business, or in parenthood. And I think you're correct. I think a lot of the times it's unfair to judge someone based on the circumstances that are directly surrounding them right now, but maybe let's look into the future, see what happens 2 or 3 years from now. And yeah, I think again, it goes back to the mentality of, as a parent, I just want my kids to be better than I am, because if they're better than I am, it will prove that I did something right. I don't think I do a lot of things right most days, and I'm sure most parents feel that way. But I am hoping that one day someone will acknowledge the fact that he turned out really good, so the dad must have done something okay, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, man, we never think we're doing good enough, and then when our kids do something, it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
I I did good on that one.
Yeah, let's try not to mess that one up.
Right.
What are some of the aspects of ministering that you took from being a pastor, whether that be a youth pastor or an associate pastor, into coaching, right? Because in so I served a church mission. I've held some roles within my church of teaching, and the most effective way to teach someone is through storytelling, right? At least that's my opinion. And being able to take that into a business perspective, it's no different. People understand if you give them a story, or examples. So that's my kind of 2 cents. But I would love to hear what your 2 cents are. What are some of those things that you took from ministry into the business coaching world?
Yeah, man. So Unleash the Champ stands for a leader. Like, we have four phases: leader to thrive, a team to develop, a rival to beat, and a championship to build. And so it's the person, the team, the internals, and the preferred future. What I learned in ministry was how to build really successful teams. And, one would argue that leading a volunteer team could be harder than the team that you pay.
Yeah, you can make that argument very easily.
Because, I had right over 500 people on my volunteer team serving every week. And so being able to develop a leadership structure that could sustain that, I definitely use now.
Yeah.
Being able to a lot of the assessments, because I'm really grateful that I worked in organizations that were really large. I mean, by all intents and purposes, both churches that I worked the majority of my time in ministry are mega churches that operated more like businesses than your
Yeah.
mom and pop, Sunnyside Baptist, which both have their place. But both of mine, like, we had learning and development departments. Most
Yeah.
churches don't have that.
Yeah.
And so being able to be a part of those things, being a part of interviewing, being a part of onboarding a new teammate, all of that I use now. Whether it's the individual coaching, I mean, at Life Church, they had an internal course and like certification that they would put us through. This was called Developing Others Through Coaching.
Hmm.
And so it was like, oh, I have all of this laid out. So when I left, it was like I had the pit stop for about 18 months at Transformation Church. Then pandemic hits. They say, hey, we're coming back to the office. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to use what I've done in training and development for 12 years. I'm going to go do it for myself. And so many of those transferables is what I do now. And I think one of the things that sets me apart is the pastor side, because
Yeah.
I'm able to just sit with people and go, okay, like, cool, you're spiraling right now, or you got a lot of success, and how do we manage both sides of that? Um, that empathetic pastor side is, I think, another aspect that's serving me really well.
And do you think, like, just naturally, are most of the people that you work with of a spiritual background? Does that alignment fit pretty regularly for you?
Yeah, people know my story. If they hear me at an event, I share that I was a pastor for a while. It's not overtly like we're not, doing a Bible study and the coaching and consulting sessions. But if they are out front and saying like, "Hey, I'm a believer," then we'll add Jesus into it. If not, then the principles I teach, like our 5 CHAMP is an acronym, so calling, heart, altitude, mindset, and performance. All of those are tied to like biblical principles without sharing Bible
Or
verses.
okay, that makes sense. How foundationally, how important has your relationship with God become in your life? What does that mean to you right now with what you're doing?
Dude, it's everything. It sustains me. It encourages me. It's it is, man. It sustains and anchors me. People ask like, man, how do you keep going? Because there's been ups and downs. I mean, you're in business too. Like we just celebrated 3 years, so we're still in startup by every
Yeah.
every part of it. We're stabilizing and we're peaks and valleys and going, okay, like there's time and time and time again where people feel prompted to like make a connection, or hey man, I just felt like we should give you this, or whatever the case is. Or the last 3 years is going, how can a guy not be real?
Yeah.
And for me, I know how destructive I was, and I know how I should not have probably still been here. And so like that is a key piece of it too, is like knowing what I've gone through is huge.
I know how important that relationship is to me, and in the decisions that I make, and the choices that I have. But we won't go too much farther into that. For those who do believe, great. For those who don't, that's fine. I hope whoever has been listening, I hope you've gotten something out of that. But I do want to dive a little bit more into the coaching. You've kind of talked a little bit about some of your values. You've talked a little bit about kind of the metrics that you use with some of your coaching clients. But what, for someone who might be interested in what that might look like, what does your coaching platform look like? Who are you specializing with? What are some of the objectives, or what outcomes are you trying to get with them?
Yeah, totally, man. So most of mine right now are in real estate, so brokerage teams, um, LOs, realtors, associations like that. Big umbrella is commission based professionals. When I started, I was targeting the person within the company, but we can make them the most. We can make it the most, you know, impressive employee, but they're probably going to get like a 5 to 7% raise. People
Yeah.
that are in commission based, they understand, man, the more they can invest, the more that they can get out, man, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the objectives is going, okay, yours 60% is other people's 100%, but how do we get you and your team working in the same direction? So, like, for example, I'm working with a company right now, and it started with working with their VP, and we just aligned mission, vision, passions, and going, okay, how do we implement this into your company? So that's where I'm taking a team and going, okay, start with the VP, clarify, get things in order, and then we implement it into the team through assessments and through coaching and consistent training, kind of CE type stuff. On an individual, they're coming to me because they're like, man, I know I'm capable of more, but I'm tired, or I'm winning, but I'm losing at the same time, whether I'm losing physically or mentally or relationally. Business is great, but something else is slipping. So we'll
Yeah.
do some of that. But man, it's really the biggest is like maximizing your leadership. I like to call it running up the score. Because when I got started in the beginning, it was like, man, I'm helping a lot of people that are just getting started, and that's great, but that rarely pays the bills. Let online content, podcast content be that. To where now it's going, okay, man, I really love working with commission based directors and above and the teams that they lead. And we get results because we take them from siloed to synergy to at least a champ, as I say it.
You kind of alluded a little bit earlier to this team mentality, growing up in sports, and then, working with the team while you were in ministry, and then obviously working as a team in more of a corporate setting. For you, why drive home the meaning of a team?
It's the most valuable asset in a company. And I believe that 100%. You can have the most secure and dialed in SOPs. You can have the most clear KPIs. You can have all of that. Human capital is the most important thing in a company. And so being able to have people stick and stay is is the lifeblood, is the cornerstone of business growth. And a lot of times people get like rarely will people leave an organization, but they will leave a leader. And so if we can help that leader lead that team better and the team build a bond together, your retention goes up, your your turnover goes down, your morale goes up, your discouragement and empower, like there's so much upside because like what was it, 2019 Harvard did a study and they surveyed how many ever thousand people and said
Yeah.
60% of employees are either neutral or disengaged. And that's 2019 before the pandemic. And so you got a team of 10, 6 out of 10 of them are like, nah, like this is cool. It's a job to me. Or they're like actively like, I don't like this. I'm just buying my time. Dude, that's massive.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, shoot, we have, 20 plus employees, 60% are disengaged or uninterested. I'm thinking, well, shoot, who is it that's disengaged or uninterested, and how can I help them be a little bit more
Yeah,
engaged? How
dude.
can we create some camaraderie around that?
And what's interesting is you go, oh man, they're neutral. We're gonna see it. It's gonna be glaring. Like their performance is gonna
No,
be down and all like this. No,
it's not.
it's not. They're doing their job. They're going in, but
Yeah,
you're gonna get exactly what will keep them out of their name out of your mouth as the leader. And but that's not how you grow a team, because once somebody comes in with a shinier carrot, they're gonna bounce.
yeah,
And so I really implore and encourage leaders at the top to go, okay, what are you doing to develop them as a person more than what they do for your profit and production within the company. So I come in and go, okay, hey, let's put them through some assessments that isn't tied to their production, isn't tied to your profit, isn't tied to, is like, let them know themselves better and do it in an environment that really brings the team, like, man, I know Brady so much more now because I know that he's a blah da 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 da, and that means that he is this and this. And because it's not, people hear this and initially they go, so we need more team building days. No, no one likes going to those. Hey, we're gonna go do forced recreation. No one likes going to those. What you do is, what can you do to improve them as a person? And a common argument that I get when I'm kind of pitching this to a leader is they go, well, what if we pour all this money and resource into them as a person and then they leave? And I'm like, well, what if you don't and they stay?
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of what you're saying too, like from a leadership perspective, isn't necessarily about their metrics in their job. It's their metrics outside of their job. Their relationship with their family, their relationship with their kids, their hobbies, things like that. Am I wrong in that? Is that right?
Nah, man, that's spot on. I mean, it's the old cliche, like, people don't care what you know until they know you care.
Yeah.
And dude, I was terrible at this. I was terrible at this early on in my leadership career. Like, God bless the first couple teammates that I had that reported to me for staying and not like punching me, because I was so focused on go, 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 that like I just didn't even consider like how they were doing outside of the work time. And so I had to like force myself, Brady, force myself to ask 3 non-work questions to each of my teammates before I asked them anything about where we were going, projects that we had, deliverables that were needing to be met.
I like that.
I had to systematize it, bro, because otherwise it'd be 6 months and they're like going through this massive thing and I had no clue because we didn't talk about it.
At what point do you think you implement and again, so to kind of preface this question, I always say having a podcast is the most selfish thing that I do because I get to learn from other people and implement some of the things. So I'm going to ask a question. This is something that's on my mind, as you're talking about this. We're to a point now where I'm not as much in the day-to-day operations as I used to be, which is a great thing because now I can focus on training, I can focus on growth, I can focus on some other things, right? But it's also because I'm not in the day to day. Obviously, I don't know what's going on every day. I don't know all the ins and outs of all of our clients' troubles. I don't, because someone else is doing it, and to be honest with you, they're doing a fantastic job at it. But at what point does it get to where you you're one step even further removed from that, and a manager is now doing that with that smaller group of individuals, right? What does that do for someone like myself? What position does that put me in with kind of that opportunity?
That's great because you have a person to make sure you know everything about.
Okay.
That's it, man. Like, if you have a manager that's leading the day to day, bro, you got one person. You get to
So
lock in
you
on
take
that.
you take it in the levels.
Oh, 100%, man.
Okay.
And so one of the things that I really love is this, and this is something that you could do crazy practical. Is I remember the story about the Home Depot CEO, and he would write handwritten cards to different employees at different stores all over the country, and he'd mail them to them, like handwritten notes. And so that's something that, like, at your level, you have a person, but you have a team of people.
Right.
Man, asking that manager, hey, what's something really cool? Like, give me things to affirm in Kyle in this department and this
Yeah.
deal. And you write a note says, hey, so and so really said that you've been crushing it. I want you to know that that affirms our value of blank. Thank you so much, Brady. Boom, put it in the mail. Don't like take it to the office and put that mug in the mail. because then what's going to happen? They're going to get it home. They may open it, or their spouse may open it. If their spouse sees it, it's like, holy crap! Like you got something from you got something from Brady. They're gonna open it up, and what is that gonna do? They're gonna he or she's gonna be affirmed. Their spouse is gonna be like, holy crap! Like he's sending that.
Yeah.
That's something crazy practical. Is I would leverage, because when I had, the 9 that led the 42 that led the rest of them in the team, I was asking all the time, hey, who's somebody crushing it? Who's somebody that did above and beyond? Who's somebody that we need to encourage? Who's somebody that is going through something? And dude, my hands hurting because I'm writing so many letters and little note cards. It didn't have to be long, couple sentences. Hey,
Yeah.
heard this about you, doing great. It aligns with this value that we have. Thank you so much, Kyle, Brady. And that's something that, man, people will start to look forward to. And it was wild, man, because I would go to people's offices and like just stop by and say, hey, and they got that thing framed. And I'm thinking, bro, that took me 5 minutes on a Monday,
Yeah.
but they got that thing framed. I think that's something crazy practical for you.
Well, I think it's important to highlight that in no part of this conversation have we had the topic of monetary compensation come up. Our entire conversation has been intrinsical. How do you make someone feel? And it's interesting you say that comment, or you quoted that. You made the comment about the quote that says, "No one cares about how much you know until they know how much you care." That's a quote that, unbeknownst to you, my grandpa told me when I first started this entrepreneurship journey, and he said, you have an opportunity to go make a lot of money. You have a lot of people to go change other people's lives, but let me just tell you this: no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And in no part of this conversation have we had the topic of money, a raise, a bonus come up. And although that's nice, and I think that should be reviewed and evaluated and given on a consistent basis, the things that are not tied to money oftentimes go a little bit further for that individual. Or would you agree?
Oh, 100%, man. People will give their life for a person that cares about them.
Yeah.
That they feel like, man, I'll run through a wall for this person. I mean, that's why, like, I feel like I had the size of team I had is because we really cared deeply. And I wasn't paying none of them. They're all volunteers.
Yeah.
But what could I pay with? My time, my energy, my effort. And man, I'm sharing stories. I'm getting stories. And so it's like, man, God, you got to be a part of this. And that's what helps people stick and stay. And then in corporate teams, if you can make them feel, man, somebody knows me, sees me, and hears me, they'll rock with you and give you grace through a lot of learnings.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, again, the more people know how much you care about them, the farther that relationship will go. And I think I want to thank you, Kyle, for hopping on. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned some things. I have my AI in the background that'll be making some notes, transcribing. Another reason why I like this platform, so that I can, again, it's a selfish reason to do a podcast. I'm going to take some of these things, I'm going to implement them and try and make my team a little bit better, because they make me look really good, and I appreciate what they do, and I know there's a lot of people that can say the same. So thank you again for hopping on. I appreciate it, Kyle. Any last words? How can people find you? If people are looking for something like this to implement with their teams, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, totally. So unleashthechamp.com is the landing page for all things. The group coaching 4-month program that I do with teams is utchuddle.com. Unleash the Champ, but utchuddle.com.
Okay.
That's just a 4-month deal that I do with teams to get them on the right path. And so that's a couple ways. I also have a podcast, Unleash the Champ Leadership Podcast, 126 episodes, I think, at the time that we're recording this. And so go check that out. And it's got a ton of free information. I love what you said, man. I also started my podcast so I could learn from dope people and implement things in my life. So I love it, man. And I appreciate the time today.
Absolutely. For those listening, I hope you've learned a a little thing or two. We've definitely had a fun time slacking off today. I appreciate you listening. Give us some show notes. Let us know how you guys like the show. If you have any comments or questions or concerns, please let us know. Like and subscribe to us on YouTube, and you guys have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for tuning in to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.